Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is V, and today we're going to be doing the Get to Know the Fantasy Reader tag. I was tagged by Jessie, the lovely Jessie May, and I'll link her video and her channel down below. Thank you so much, Jessie, for tagging me. You are the sweetest. Let's get into the questions, shall we? So the first question is, what is your fantasy origin story? How did you come to read your first fantasy novel? So I've always been a reader. My mom is a reader, so when I was young, she always constantly pushed books at me. I think I read Enid Blyton, which I guess is sort of fantasy. For this question, I'm going to pick Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Ronald Dahl. The reason being is that this was the first non-picture book that I read, and this really pushed me to read more books, which are more fantasy books. I don't quite remember what other books I've read, but this memory is very distinctive. And obviously Harry Potter is another one as well, but I'm not gonna mention that because that's just a generic answer, which is why I picked Charlie and the Chocolate Factory for this one. I actually also love the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Johnny Depp one. I actually haven't seen the original one, which is a shame. I know I should. I will one day, don't you worry. So the second question is, if you could be the hero or heroine in a fantasy novel, who would be the author and what's one trope you insist be in the story? So far my favorite fantasy author is actually Brandon Sanderson because I really love his writing style. So I would pick Brandon Sanderson to be the author of my novel. Trope. I really love the found family trope, or like a ragtag group trope, if that makes sense. So Brandon Sanderson, if you can write me a found family, thank you. That would be much appreciated. So the third question is, what is a fantasy you've read this year and that you want more people to read? I think definitely The Final Empire, for sure, by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book of the Mistborn trilogy, and my god. I haven't finished the trilogy yet. I have The Hero of Ages left, and it's just, oh my god, the world, the characters, is just phenomenal, and I absolutely love it. So yeah, definitely read The Final Empire if you haven't. And if you're scared of getting into adult fantasy, I think this is a good place to start because Brandon Sanderson doesn't info dump. He slowly gives you information and it's easy to digest, which at least I think so, for sure. And I think if someone were to want to get into adult fantasy, this would be a good place to start. So the fourth question is, what is your favorite fantasy subgenre? What subgenre have you not read much from? I think high fantasy. I just love intricate worlds and magic systems. I think that's my favorite fantasy genre, high fantasy or epic fantasy. Either one. The grander, the better. What subgenre have you not read much from? Maybe urban fantasy? I think the only urban fantasy I've read so far is House of Earth and Blood. And I'm talking about specifically adult fantasy, not YA. Just adult fantasy, and House of Earth and Blood is adult fantasy. Maybe Vicious by V. Schwab, and I'm pretty sure that's urban fantasy. So those two. That's the only, I think, urban fantasy that I've read so far. So I want to read more urban fantasy. So question number 5 is, who is your Autobuy fantasy author? Sarah J. Maas, Cassandra Clare, Brandon Sanderson. Who else? I guess V. Schwab as well. Oh, Mariah V. Snyder. Absolutely love her Poison Studies series. For sure, Autobuy as well. That's it so far. Alright, so number 6 is, how do you typically find fantasy recommendations? Definitely Booktube, Goodreads, and my mom. I feel like my mom knows more than me, which is crazy. But yeah, those 3. Booktube, Goodreads, and my mom. So number 7 is, what is an upcoming fantasy release you're excited for? Definitely Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. Even though I haven't read the Stormlight Archive yet, still very excited for this. Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Victoria Schwab, for sure. The Burning God by R.F. Kuang. I just got the Puppy War and the Dragon Republic, so I'm definitely excited for that as well. I'm gonna put it at 3 max because there's a lot, but I'll leave it at 3. Alright, so number 8 is, what is one misconception about fantasy you would like to lay to rest? I think things have been addressed because obviously we're learning and we're adapting to everything that's happening in the world, and I think everything has been addressed. Definitely the women representation for sure have been addressed because there's a lot of them in fantasy now, which is great. Queer characters as well. There are a few. Definitely could improve, obviously, but there are queer characters in fantasy now, which is great. And yeah, pretty much it. I don't think we need to address anything. I think everything's okay in fantasy. Like, obviously we can improve, but there's no like dire issues that we need to address. Actually, maybe more fantasies that are not European based. That would be good. That would be good. Question number 9 is, if someone had never read a fantasy before and asked you to recommend the first 3 books that come to mind as places to start, what would those recommendations be? Again, Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. Fishes by V. Schwab as well. That's a good one. And also The Poison Study by Mariah V. Snyder. I don't think I talk a lot about this series on my channel, but this is one of my favorite series of all time. And I absolutely love the Poison Study series and the characters. Oh, so good. The reason why I didn't recommend any Sarah J. Maas book, because Throne of Glass is high fantasy. Court of Thorns and Roses is very romance based. I don't know if a lot of people like that, but I definitely do, which is why I recommended Poison Study instead. Now, the last question is, who is the most recent fantasy reading content creator you came across that you'd like to shout out? The booktuber I'm going to mention is fairly well known, but I still really love the channel, and that is What Cass Read. She definitely reads a lot of fantasy, young adult fantasy for sure. I really love her energy and her recommendations for sure. She reads a lot of books that I want to read and have read, so definitely check her out. She is amazing. So those are all the questions for this Get to Know the Fantasy Reader tag. Hopefully you know me better now as a fantasy reader. Hopefully. I'm not going to tag anyone specifically, but anyone who wants to do this tag is more than welcome to do it. And again, thank you so much to Jessie for tagging me. I literally almost dropped my nail polish when you mentioned my name in the video. I was painting my nails. I don't have it now because they chipped. Hate that. I am very flattered. Thank you so much, Jessie. Definitely check her channel down below and the booktubers I mentioned as well. And also the books I mentioned in this video will also be linked down below. So definitely check it out. If you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!